Hi, I'm Shannon Nelson. With me today, world champion and four-time Olympic kayaker, David Ford. David Ford is, by his own admission, the old guy on the kayaking block. However, at the ripe old age of 41, he's still in contention to represent Canada at the 2008 Olympics. And there's much to be said for having all that experience under your belt. As hard as they may work, the young guys have a hard time keeping up with him. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Got that all out. It was a miracle. So congratulations, because in my limited understanding of the sport of kayaking, I hear that you have won a spot for Canada at the 2008 Olympics.
Correct.
So now what you need to do is clarify that that doesn't necessarily mean that you've won a spot for David Ford.
No, I had an opportunity to qualify a spot for Canada at the World Championships. Very limited field at the Olympic Games. At the World Championships, I'll have about 110 competitors.
Right.
Whereas at the Olympic Games, only one athlete per country goes, and there's only going to be around 22 athletes. So it's the best of the best.
Wow.
So I qualified a spot for Canada.
This was in Brazil?
Which was in Brazil in September, and now that gives me the opportunity to qualify for the Canadian team in April. So that I can go to my 5th Olympic Games.
Okay, but how is it that the guy who gets the spot for Canada doesn't just get the automatic, away you go?
I had the opportunity to do that also had I won a medal at the same time, which I didn't do this time. It's the first time I haven't done that for an Olympic Games in a few games. So it's a new position for me to be in, to have to qualify a spot myself now. But I do get points from the World Championship, so I am a good ways ahead of everyone else. But I think it's important in a sport like ours, which is so dynamic, that you leave it open as long as possible, so that the best athlete goes to the games. And had they given it to me then, and then maybe I wasn't the best athlete in the spring, I'm not sure that I would feel good about going to the Olympic Games if there was someone better than me in Canada that could go and potentially have a result that would be better than I could do, because at the end of the day I am a Canadian and I cheer for Canadian athletics, and that would be a bit of a crime, especially being a 5-time Olympian. I don't need to go as a tourist. I want to go to win.
Yeah. Well, yeah, even at the ripe old age of 41.
That's right.
And I guess there's time between now and 2010. This would keep everybody on their toes and strong and competing, and that spot will be determined when?
Well, it's 2008, so we're...
Oh, pardon me. Right. This is the summer.
We're a summer sport. Everyone's thinking Whistler 2010, which is a very important thing for Canada to be hosting an Olympic Games. But 2008 in Beijing is right around the corner, and we'll decide in April what our team will look like. And then in August, it's for all the marbles.
Have you been to Beijing?
I have been to Beijing now twice. We had a pre-Olympic event in August, which was essentially a much bigger field than will be at the Olympics, but it was on the Olympic course and during the time that we'll be there this August for the Olympic Games. And I had a good competition. I was injured, which was a little bit frustrating, but I finished 4th, so it gives me some good confidence. I think the course they built there, had I sort of written a wish list of what I wanted out of a course for the Olympic Games, I'm not sure they would have missed anything off that list. So
really?
It gives you a lot of personal motivation to know that they've built something that's to your skill set. Whereas a lot of the Europeans who grow up on sort of the smaller rivers and the little sort of the artificial stadiums tend to be a little bit smaller than natural whitewater, which is what I've grown up on. So I'm going to the games with sort of looking forward to it, whereas they're looking ahead going, geez, how do I prepare for that? So it's nice to be in that position for sure.
So I've heard from various people that we've spoken to who've actually been to Beijing that, there's a real pollution factor there. Are you guys in that or out of that, or will it impact you?
Well, I'm a 90-second sport, so it's not nice to live in pollution, certainly, but I'm not sure that compared to, say, a marathon runner, I'm not sure I'll have the same impact to performance. But for every Olympics I've been to, they've talked about pollution. Barcelona, Atlanta, Sydney not so much, but certainly Athens. And you go and there's some pollution, but it's it's nothing. But in Beijing, you go and you can't see across the street once you go up 3 floors. It's something you can't really describe to someone unless you've been there. And we'll go and we'll be training for 90 minutes on the river, and we're in the water, and it's a nice environment to be in. But by the end, you feel like you're just sort of spitting dirt. And it's not a pleasant feeling, but that's the way it is. It's the same for everybody, and you try and sort of limit the impact that it will have and be smart about it.
Yeah. What is an ideal course for you?
Ideal course for me, being a natural whitewater paddler, that's where I grew up, is something that has a lot of force to it, so a lot of flow. a lot of big waves, texture to the water, so it's not just like a drop and then a flat bit, then a drop and a flat bit. I want something where there are constantly waves you've got to paddle around, over, through, stopping the boat, reaccelerating the boat, lots of really dynamic big drops, so that sort of your skill, you can't just put your head down and race as hard as you can. You actually have to be a really good river tactician.
Right.
And I think, especially at the Olympic Games, which is the pressure cooker of sport, anytime you have something that is so technically demanding, it goes to the sort of the more experienced athlete, because I've seen a lot more than everybody else, and I've been around a lot more than everybody else. So you get a little less jittery, a little less worried, and you kind of know what you can do with something that may be a little bit more challenging for everybody else.
Yeah, so the benefit of being the elder statesman of kayaking.
Certainly, and not just the elder statesman, but someone who grew up in North America on big natural whitewater, scaring myself to death year after year.
Yeah.
You know, you get there and it's just not so scary.
So you did grow up kayaking. I read, though, that your first couple of experiences were not that rewarding for you.
Well, I started paddling when I was around 8 years old. My family did it, my parents did it as a summer recreational activity, and I got dragged to the mountains, and you get thrown in a boat or left at the campsite. And every time I do something sort of like have an accomplishment of some type, my parents remind me that at 8 years old I was cold, scared, crying, and adamant that I was never coming back to the river. And you look at a 30-year career later, a couple of world titles and 5 Olympics hopefully, and you're kind of like, how did I go from that scared little 8-year-old to this kind of accomplishment? It's pretty amazing.
Well, how did it happen? I mean, was there a turning point for you? Obviously, the first couple times you went out, you didn't like it, but then what happened? What kind of got you hooked?
That's it. You just get hooked. You get out on the water and you get that first moment where your boat is surfing a wave, or you get just that right wave in the face, or you get down a river run that's just, you have eagles following you, and you kind of get to the bottom and you're like, wow, I accomplished that. Or I got that feeling of flying or something. And then you're like, can't wait till the next time. It's a lot like golf, actually, where you get that one perfect drive and a round, it brings you back the next time, and it's kind of the same thing. And when you're 8, 10, 13 years old and you're kind of good at something, it kind of gives you a place to fit in, it gives you some sort of self-worth, and it steamrolls from there a little bit.
Now, you were pretty young when you actually, didn't you, it was the Alberta provincial team that, that you qualified for.
Yeah.
Was it sort of a fluke that
that
happened?
Yeah, we went to the Red Deer River in Alberta to go paddling, and the river was so low that it was so boring. We stumbled across a race. I was 13 years old, and I entered the race in the junior class, which is actually 18 years of age and under. So at 13, I was just whatever.
The baby.
At the end of the weekend, someone came up and handed me a team uniform and said, congratulations, you're going to the national championships.
Huh.
And I was like, this racing thing could be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went to the nationals, finished second last, I think. But at that point, it was like, this is something pretty cool. And we were actually on an Olympic hiatus at the time. We got taken out after 72 and didn't get back in until 92. So for me, it was just, it wasn't even an Olympic dream at that point. It was just, this was something that I was good at, I enjoyed. Let's see how far you could go with it. And my goal at that point was to become national champion.
Right.
And I couldn't even see beyond that. There was nothing beyond that. That was my frame of reference. And
so why would it happen that they took it out of the Olympics?
I think a few things. One is cost of the venue. It costs a lot to build a stadium, whitewater stadium, and at that time, whitewater rafting wasn't a real vocation for people, whereas now, a lot of people go whitewater rafting, and that's what they use these courses for. They're not just building them for the Olympics anymore, they're popping up everywhere across the world. North America has several now. Yeah. China has, I think, 9 already. Wow. There are hundreds in France, from full-on Olympic size to just little, almost drainage ditches, but they're really into it.
It's recreation.
Yeah.
So explain to me what it requires generally in a human being to do well at that.
Well, I mean, there's 2 kinds of well. Certainly to be an Olympic level world champion kayaker, you have to have good strength to weight ratio, excellent power, some intelligence to be able to deal with learning a course and remembering it, because there's so much to remember. It's not just the 20 slalom gates, it's everything you have to do in between the gates to deal with the river as well.
Right.
But to be a paddler, there's so much power in the river, there's so much that you can do with the flow of the water that actually you don't have to be anything to be a kayaker, because you can harness so much power from the river itself. And I've seen 85-year-old guys come out and paddle with us, and they're doing just fine because they're harnessing the power of the water and having a great time. And that's one of the things I really like about our sport, is it's a lifestyle as well as an Olympic profession.
Yeah.
So whether I was doing it for the Olympics right now or for myself, it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's a lifestyle, but you know, it can be, as you yourself have admitted, a pretty dangerous kind of sport.
It can be, especially when you get to sort of my level, to go out and do it recreationally and to feel that buzz or to get that rush. The margin for error becomes so small that you'd go and run a river where you'd make it 9 times out of 10, but unfortunately that 1 time out of 10, you're not going to come home. And
like, people die.
People die. I've lost more friends than I can count on fingers and toes, including some very, very close friends, and that really kind of drives home. The Olympic sport, where you're racing in stadiums, is extremely safe because it's manufactured to be safe.
Right.
And I made a conscious decision when my best friend died in '97 that maybe it was time for me to really just focus on my Olympic aspirations. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that shortly thereafter I became world champion and kind of had my best 5 or 6 years of my career, because I think I focused my energies a little bit more specifically to being a competitive athlete rather than just being a kayaker. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to paint it as being a dangerous sport, because it's as dangerous as you make it. It's an actually very safe sport if you learn your limits, take your steps, learn from people who know what they're doing, and always sort of take care when you're out on the water. There's no reason for it to be dangerous. It's just if you make that choice as an extreme paddler to sort of limit your chance of coming home.
Mm-hmm. I know you're not a religious guy, but my sense of it is that the whole experience of being in the river with, as you say, the eagles mm-hmm. flying around you, and there's a buzz to that is a spiritual thing.
I think it's very spiritual, and it's kind of why I think I got hooked into paddling. When you're in the mountains in natural setting and the flow of the river, and you kind of lose yourself in it, and you become kind of connected to something larger than just your own sort of world. You become connected to nature almost. And having lost so many friends at it, you kind of need to find a balance for why that's happening, and, mm-hmm. and where you fit in, and sort of the balance between, well, I got to win this race, but I also kind of want to have some balance in my life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of breeds a spirituality of sorts, I guess.
So how do you find that?
The balance?
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult. Mm-hmm. Even being an experienced athlete, I think now I probably have a better handle on it than I did 10 years ago, which kind of is nice at the river every day in training and at competitions that don't go so well. I think you get a little bit more perspective for it is just a sport, and it's not life. Mm-hmm. Life can be very hard for people, and what I do affords me a great lifestyle, and win or lose at the end of the day, my life is pretty great.
Let's talk about the lifestyle of being an Olympic kayaker, potentially, again, mm-hmm. 4-time Olympic kayaker. Are you able to do this full-time and make a decent living at it?
I am, fortunately. I have an agent who does a great job of making sure I have the corporate partners necessary to be able to do my sport the right way, because it's a European-dominated sport. They have a lot of resources at their disposal, so I need to make sure that I'm at that same level to be competitive. But it also affords me a lifestyle that is relatively comfortable, and I can say I don't think I could be 41 years old and still doing this if I didn't feel like I could sort of support my family and be productive to myself for mm-hmm. the future.
Right.
And I feel blessed in that, because as Canadian athletes, that's not the story you hear very often.
No, we never hear it. It's always, the complaining that there isn't enough funding for them to actually, reach their potential.
Absolutely. I'm very fortunate to be in a visually dynamic sport, mm-hmm. albeit a European-dominated sport, so that's where most of the notoriety is. But still, I've been around on the national team for 25 years. I've won some very big titles.
Yeah.
Been seen at the Olympic Games. So my body of work is such that I can offer a corporate partner quite a bit, where maybe some of the other athletes, even though they have the same story to offer or the same package to offer, it's just not quite as visible. Mm-hmm. So I'm very fortunate to have that visibility and to be able to be successful selling it.